Here's the raw truth most men never want to face. If you're the one chasing her, you've already lost. The moment you lean forward with desperate energy, the game is over. You've placed her on the pedestal and lowered yourself to the ground. And once a woman senses you're beneath her, once she feels you need her more than she needs you, you've killed attraction at the root. The men women chase are not the richest, the youngest, or even the best looking. They are the men who flip the psychology of the interaction. They're the ones who walk into a room and don't need anyone's attention but somehow draw it anyway. They don't chase validation. They command respect. And that difference is why women lie awake at night replaying them while forgetting the others by morning. You've been told your whole life to chase, to prove yourself, to win her over with effort. But the men she obsesses over don't operate on effort. They operate on gravity. And in this video, I'm going to give you 10 pieces of psychological advice that will flip the script. 10 truths that turn you from the chaser into the man she can't stop chasing. Understand this. Women are not wired to chase men who perform for them. They are wired to chase men who trigger their emotions in ways that feel rare, dangerous, and magnetic. This isn't manipulation. This isn't about tricking her. It's about becoming the kind of man her nervous system can't ignore. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The man who masters his own mind, his own emotions, his own frame. That's the man who draws women in without lifting a finger. Because women don't fall in love with what you give them. They fall in love with how they feel in your presence. Calm, curious, uncertain, safe, challenged, alive. So in this journey, I'm not going to give you pickup lines or cheap tactics. I'm going to give you 10 psychological weapons. Each one is a shift in the way you carry yourself. Each one is a truth that flips her instincts upside down and makes her chase you instead of the other way around. By the end, you'll see why the rarest, most irresistible men are the ones who don't play games. They play life at a higher level. And women have no choice but to follow. Point 1. Stop seeking, start choosing. Most men destroy their chances with women because they walk into every interaction seeking approval. They're scanning for signs that she likes them, waiting for crumbs of validation, desperate for reassurance. And do you know what that energy communicates? Weakness. The second she feels you're seeking, she knows she has the power. And once she has the power, she never has to chase you. Psychologically, this comes down to scarcity bias. We value what's rare and we dismiss what's abundant. If you're seeking her approval, you're abundant, because every other man she meets is doing the same thing. But the man who doesn't seek, the man who chooses, he flips the bias. Suddenly he becomes rare, and rarity is irresistible. Let me give you a real story. Tom, 48, had spent years in relationships where he bent over backward to prove his worth. He paid for everything, texted constantly, showered women with compliments. And yet every time they lost interest. One day, after another brutal breakup, he flipped the script. On his next date, he stopped trying to impress. He told himself, "I'm here to see if she fits into my world, not the other way around." The shift was instant. Instead of leaning forward, he leaned back. Instead of bombarding her with questions, he shared his values and observed hers. That woman couldn't stop texting him afterward because for the first time, she felt she had to earn him. This is exactly what Epictetus meant when he said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." The man who wants less, the man who isn't starving for approval, radiates abundance. And abundance is magnetic. Because deep down, every woman wants to feel like she won a prize, not like she was doing a charity project. So here's your shift. Stop seeking. Stop waiting for her approval, her attention, her affection to validate you. Walk into every interaction as the chooser, not the seeker. Ask yourself, does she meet my standard? Does she fit into my vision? When you flip the frame, something powerful happens. She feels the gap. She senses your detachment. And in that gap, her instincts awaken. She begins to lean in. She begins to chase. Because the moment she realizes you don't need her is the moment she starts to want you. Point 2. Master the power of silence. Most men are terrified of silence. The moment there's a pause in conversation, they scramble to fill it. With nervous jokes, with forced compliments, with empty chatter. But here's the truth. Silence is not your enemy. Silence is your greatest weapon. Psychologically, silence creates tension, and tension is what fuels attraction. When you can sit in silence without fidgeting, without reaching for your phone, without begging for her reaction, you communicate one thing: I am comfortable in myself. That energy is rare, and because it's rare, it's magnetic. Think of James, 36. On his date, after a deep question, he didn't rush to fill the space. He leaned back, held eye contact, and let her words linger. At first, she shifted in her seat. Then she started opening up, sharing more than she expected. Later, she admitted that his silence made her feel both nervous and safe, like he was drawing her in without effort. That's the paradox of silence. It unsettles her mind, but anchors her emotions. The Stoics understood this power. Seneca wrote, "Silence is a lesson learned through life's many sufferings. When you've suffered, when you've endured, when you've faced the storms of life, you no longer feel the need to prove yourself with constant noise. Your silence speaks for you, and it says more than words ever could. Here's your shift. Stop fearing silence. Embrace it. When she speaks, don't rush to respond. Let her words breathe. When there's a pause, don't panic. Hold it. When the moment feels charged, let the silence amplify it instead of breaking it. Because in those quiet moments, you're telling her something most men never can. I am whole. I don't need to fill the void." And that presence makes her chase. Because women can't resist the gravity of a man who speaks volumes without saying a word. Point 3. Lead emotionally, never follow. Here's a brutal truth. Most men are emotional followers. When she's angry, they panic. When she's sad, they try to fix it. When she's dramatic, they match her chaos. But the man women chase is never the one who bends to her moods. It's the man who sets the tone, who leads her emotions instead of reacting to them. Psychologically, this comes down to mirror neurons. Human beings sync their emotions to those around them. If you're nervous, she feels nervous. If you're calm, she feels calm. Most men let women control this exchange, but the man who can stay grounded when she's spiraling, who can laugh when she tests him, who can calm her storm without being pulled into it, that man becomes unforgettable. Take David, 41. He was dating a woman who loved to push buttons, to stir drama. One night, she snapped at him over something small. Any other man would have sulked or argued. David didn't. He smiled, leaned back, and said, "You're cute when you're mad." Instantly, the tension broke. She laughed. She leaned into him. Why? Because he didn't follow her storm. He led her back into calm. That's emotional leadership. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." The brave man isn't afraid of her emotions. He doesn't get trapped by them. He is free to lead, and women crave that freedom. Because deep down, she doesn't want a man who gets lost in her chaos. She wants a man who can pull her out of it. Here's your shift. Stop being a thermometer, start being a thermostat. Don't reflect her temperature, set it. If she's upset, ground her with calm presence. If she's anxious, anchor her with humor. If she's lost, hold steady in your stillness. Because when you lead her emotions, you're not just giving her comfort. You're giving her direction. And women will chase that direction because it's rare, because it's magnetic, and because it makes them feel safe in a way no boy ever could. Point 4. Keep mystery alive. Here's a brutal truth. Predictability kills desire. The men who women get bored of are the ones who lay all their cards on the table, explaining every thought, every detail, every move. They think transparency equals intimacy. But what it really equals is death. Death of intrigue, death of imagination, death of the chase. Psychologically, this is the law of dopamine. Our brains are wired to crave uncertainty. When something is certain, the reward is small. When something is uncertain, the reward becomes addictive. That's why slot machines hook people more than paychecks. Paychecks are predictable. Slot machines are not. And in relationships, the same truth applies. If she can predict your every move, she loses the thrill. But if you leave room for uncertainty, she becomes addicted to the mystery. Take Michael, 37. He went on a date. And instead of pouring out his whole life story like most men, he revealed himself in layers. A few stories, a few values, then he pulled back. Later that night, instead of texting a long recap, he simply said, "Good night." I'll tell you tomorrow the thing I noticed about you that surprised me. She admitted later she lay awake wondering what he saw. That curiosity made her chase him harder. Why? Because her mind couldn't settle. He became a puzzle she had to solve. The Stoics lived this naturally. Zeno once said, "Better to trip with the feet than with the tongue." Most men trip with their tongues, spilling everything, oversharing, trying to force connection. But the man who speaks less, who lets silence and mystery do the work, becomes magnetic. Here's your shift. Stop over-explaining. Stop dumping your life story. Stop texting like an open book. Share your world like chapters, not like a resume. Let her discover you over time. And when she starts asking questions, don't answer all of them at once. Let her imagination do the heavy lifting, because the moment she's trying to figure you out, she's already chasing. Point 5. Boundaries make you valuable. Most men think tolerance earns love. They believe if they put up with disrespect, if they stay patient through games, if they lower their standards, she'll finally appreciate them. But here's the raw truth. Women don't respect men who tolerate disrespect. They don't chase men who have no lines. They chase the man who has boundaries, and who enforces them without anger, without fear, without hesitation. Psychologically, boundaries signal value. Humans don't treasure what comes without conditions. We respect what demands something of us. If you let her cancel last minute without consequence, if you accept rudeness, if you allow constant testing, you're signaling one thing. I don't value myself enough to walk away. And if you don't value yourself, why should she? Consider Paul, 39. He was dating a woman who repeatedly flaked on plans. The old Paul would have smiled, excused it, and begged for another chance. But this time, he calmly said, "If you're not serious about my time, this won't work." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't beg. He simply enforced his standard. She was stunned. Hours later, she texted him apologizing, asking for another chance. Why? Because his boundary communicated what no compliment ever could. I value myself more than I value your approval. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." A good man doesn't need to shout about his standards. He lives them. He enforces them. And women feel that. They test, yes, but they secretly crave the man strong enough to say no. Here's your shift. Don't fear losing her. Fear losing yourself. If she crosses your line, let her feel the consequence. Not through yelling, not through games, through calm withdrawal. Because nothing drives a woman crazier than realizing you would rather lose her than betray your code. That's when she starts to chase, not because you manipulated her, but because she finally sees you as rare. Point 6. Spark curiosity. Don't satisfy it. Here's the truth. Women don't chase men they fully understand. They chase the ones who leave them wondering, the ones who spark a question mark in her mind. Because curiosity is a stronger hook than certainty. Certainty closes the loop. Curiosity keeps it open. And the open loop is what keeps her thoughts circling back to you. Psychologically, this is about the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency of the mind to obsess over unfinished business. When you answer every question directly, when you reveal everything too soon, you close the loop. But when you leave just enough unanswered, her mind keeps replaying you. That's why the man who's just a little unpredictable, who doesn't reveal everything at once, who ends a conversation at the peak instead of the fade, he's the man she can't shake. Think about Eric, 44. After a date, she asked him what he thought of her. Any other guy would have showered her with compliments. Eric didn't. He paused, smiled, and said, "You're intriguing, but I haven't figured you out yet." Then he changed the subject. She laughed, but later confessed she couldn't stop thinking about what he meant. That one line made her chase because he didn't give her closure. He gave her curiosity. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When you spark curiosity, you dye her thoughts with your presence. You become the color she can't wash away. Here's your shift. Stop aiming for closure. Stop trying to explain yourself fully. Leave some stories unfinished. End conversations before they fizzle out. Give her just enough to think, what did he mean? That's the thought that keeps her up at night. That's the thought that makes her chase. Point 7. Purpose over pleasure. Most men center their entire lives around women. They make women their purpose. They sacrifice their mission, their growth, their discipline, all to gain her approval. And then they wonder why she loses interest. The truth? A man who makes her the center of his life becomes unattractive. A man who makes his mission the center of his life becomes irresistible. Psychologically, this ties to evolutionary wiring. Women aren't wired to chase men who orbit around them. They're wired to chase men who are going somewhere, men who are building, conquering, creating. The man on a mission sparks her primal instincts. If I can win him, I get pulled into his world. That's the chase. Take Jonathan, 52. After a divorce, he spent months chasing women, desperate to fill the void. Nothing worked. They sensed his emptiness. Then he shifted. He poured himself into rebuilding his business, into training, into writing the book he'd always wanted to write. And suddenly women started pursuing him, not because he tried harder, but because his life radiated purpose. They wanted in, Epictetus said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Purpose isn't words, it's action. It's showing day after day that your mission doesn't bend for anyone. Women don't want to be your mission. They want to be invited into a life already moving with power. Here's your shift. Stop centering her. Center your mission. Build something bigger than desire. When she sees you working, building, growing, she won't feel like she's the prize. She'll feel like you are. And that's when the chase begins. Not because you begged for attention, but because you gave her something to respect. Point 8. Indifference is power. Here's a truth most men choke on. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And nothing drives a woman crazier than a man who cannot be swayed by her games, her drama, or her temptations. Psychologically, indifference is the ultimate display of abundance. When you're not desperate for her reaction, when you're not hooked on whether she stays or leaves, you show that your world is bigger than her approval. That unsettles her in the best way. Because deep down, every woman craves the challenge of a man who cannot be easily moved. Consider Adam, 35. His girlfriend tried the silent treatment after an argument, expecting him to beg for reconciliation. He didn't. He went to the gym, handled his work, and carried on. Hours later, she caved, texting him first. Why? Because his indifference proved his strength. It showed her she wasn't his oxygen, and that made her chase harder. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Indifference isn't coldness. It's composure. It's refusing to let her control your emotional state. That steadiness is rare, and rarity is magnetic. Here's your shift. Don't punish. Don't play games. Don't dramatize. Simply refuse to be pulled off your center. If she withdraws, let her. If she tests you, smile. If she tries to provoke, stay grounded. Because the man who remains indifferent to chaos becomes the one she can't forget. Point 9. Control the frame. Control the chase. Every interaction between a man and a woman exists inside a frame. Either you're living in her frame or she's living in yours. The frame is the unspoken agreement of who is leading and who is following. Most men unconsciously accept her frame, her rules, her pace, her terms. And then they wonder why she loses interest. Psychologically, the frame is about dominance, not the aggressive kind, but the kind that quietly asserts, "This is my world, and you are invited." When a woman enters a man's frame, she feels both challenged and safe. Challenged because he won't bend to her whims. Safe because he knows where he's going. That duality is irresistible. Take Richard, 46. On his date, she tested him by saying, "I don't usually date guys who..." Insert jab. Most men would defend themselves or apologize. Richard didn't. He laughed and said, "Good thing I'm not like most guys then." In that moment, he flipped the frame. Instead of defending himself in her world, he pulled her into his. She admitted later that she couldn't stop thinking about how effortlessly he handled her test. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The frame is your mind. The moment you surrender it, you lose. The moment you hold it, she chases. Here's your shift. Never step into her frame. If she tries to lead, don't resist with aggression. Redirect with ease. Invite her into your pace, your humor, your standards. When you control the frame, you control the dynamic. And when you control the dynamic, she cannot help but chase you. Point 10. Desire without need. Here's the final piece, the paradox that makes women obsessed. You must desire her, but never need her. Desire makes you human. Need makes you weak. The man who desires with control is irresistible. The man who needs without restraint is disposable. Psychologically, this comes down to attachment. Neediness signals dependency. Desire signals choice. A woman doesn't want to be your crutch. She wants to be your reward. When she feels your attraction but also feels your freedom, she knows she has something rare, a man who could walk away at any moment but chooses to stay. Think of Daniel, 2. He told the woman he was seeing, "I enjoy you, but I don't need you." At first she was shocked. Then she leaned in harder. Why? Because he made her feel special without being dependent. His desire was clean, not desperate. That's what women crave. Seneca once wrote, "He who is not a slave to necessity is a free man." Desire is freedom. Need is slavery. And women chase men who are free. Here's your shift. Don't kill your attraction. Own it, show it. But detach it from need. Let her feel wanted, but also know you could walk away tomorrow and still stand tall. That paradox, desire without need, is what flips the script. That's what makes her chase. So here we are, brother. 10 psychological truths. 10 shifts that flip the frame and make her chase you. Not because you begged, not because you performed, not because you sacrificed your dignity, but because you became the kind of man she cannot ignore. Remember this. Attraction isn't built in what you give her. It's built in what you withhold, in your silence, in your indifference, in your mission, in your frame. These are the things that separate men from boys, leaders from followers, the unforgettable from the forgotten, Marcus Aurelius said. A man's worth is no greater than the ambitions he holds. Your ambition should not be to chase women. It should be to master yourself. Because when you do, women don't just chase you. They fight to stay in your orbit. If you're ready to stop chasing and start being chased, I want you to drop the phrase, "I choose, I lead" in the comments so I know you're part of this brotherhood. Subscribe, because what we're building here isn't just dating advice. It's a movement. A movement of men reclaiming their strength, their silence, their boundaries, their purpose. And in the next video, I'll show you how to pass her tests without breaking a sweat, because once you master that, you don't just attract women. You keep them chasing you for life. Until then, remember, the man who needs nothing controls everything.